I'll suggest one thing. It's the only one that he's got. He walks out of Rideau Cottage, across the lawn to Rideau Hall, walks in, knocks on the bed, and asks for Mary Simon to give him an electoral writ.
In a surprise move, the rebel faction in Justin Trudeau's Liberal caucus seems intent on not letting the Prime Minister change the narrative in the news, as one member of Parliament openly calls for Trudeau to step down, prompting even more speculation that calling an election might be the only choice that Trudeau has left.
Let's take a look.
Sean Casey is the Liberal Member of Parliament for Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and he joins me now. Sean Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
I want to start with a very simple question. Do you think Justin Trudeau should stay on as Liberal leader?
No, I don't. My job has always been to project the voice of the people I represent in Ottawa, to be Charlottetown's representative in Ottawa and not the reverse. And the message that I've been getting loud and clear and more strongly as time goes by is that it's time for him to go. And I agree.
Did you come to that conclusion before you started hearing it at the doors? I mean, when you talk to people in your riding, what are your constituents saying to you?
There's a general malaise. There's a level of tiredness. The number one issue at the doors in Prince Edward Island has for a long time been healthcare. That's been supplanted by concerns over leadership. And people have had enough. They've tuned him out, and they want him to go. I can't tell you the number of people that have said to me, Sean, I'm afraid of Poilievre. I want to vote for you, but I can't.
And right there it is. The optics that these Liberal MPs have created for themselves is that over the past 9 years, things have been horrible for Canadians, but they're not going to speak up until their job is at risk.
And that's the problem, right? You have these politicians that you know, they've stuck it out with Trudeau for 9, almost 10 years, and with less than a year left, basically, until the next election, you know, they're all of a sudden saying, oh, well, Trudeau has to go. Why? Because people are telling me that they're not going to vote for me. Okay, so now you're going to oppose Trudeau.
Right. And now that may or may not be the case. There's a lot of personal and inter-party politics that go into a decision like this. But the point is, this is what the public is seeing. The public is seeing it's been okay for you guys to vote alongside with what Trudeau wants for the past 9 years, no matter how badly it affects Canada, the middle class, my particular family, me as an individual, etc., etc., etc. You guys have been content to do that, but now that it's affecting your job, now is the time to speak out, and that's what these MPs are going to have to fight against.
Well, and this is kind of what people on the Conservatives or people on the right are just sitting back and frankly kind of laughing at, because Canadians are going to see through this, you know, 100%. And then they're, you know, so you have these Liberals that they're fighting to try and keep their jobs, and now they're trying to fight Trudeau, and Trudeau's fighting against these guys because he wants to keep his job. So this is just, you know, one big cage fight within the Liberal Party now. So now they're attacking each other. The Conservatives almost don't have to say anything at this point.
But it also, I think, creates this illusion of where were you when we needed you? Where were you when Trudeau was raising the carbon tax? Where were you when they were handing out billions of dollars to foreign countries? Where were you when immigration was through the roof? Where were you for all of this? But now that your job's affected, now you're speaking out. Well, and that's the optics that has been created here.
And I think the biggest question for Canadians is, where were you when Trudeau started taking away our rights? And you voted with him to do it.
So this is something I've heard from MPs that I've been speaking with over the last little while, and I'm sure you have read the reports and maybe even seen evidence of it yourself, of the efforts to try to force a leadership change at the top of your party. How widespread is the sentiment you've just expressed inside the Liberal caucus?
I would say it's wider than what meets the eye, honestly. There are a lot of people who have concerns. There are many who have a myriad of reasons not to express them. But those that have come to the same conclusion as me seem to be becoming more emboldened with the passage of time. I think that to a person, it's for the same reason as me, is because everywhere they go in their riding, that's what they're getting.
Do you know about these efforts to get people to sign on to a pledge or to draft a letter to bring to the Prime Minister to ask him to resign?
Only secondhand, and really not much more than what has been reported in the media. I am aware that there have been meetings. I know of some of the people who have been at the meetings. I am not one of them. I have not seen a pledge. I've heard about a pledge. And all of that is public information at this point. So I'm not much wiser than you on anything, David, including this.
Do you think that's true?
I don't think anything he said there is actually,
Yeah.
Well, let me correct myself. I think 90% of what he said is completely fabricated, because
well, he's part of the Atlantic Liberal Caucus, right?
Yes, and that was the caucus that allegedly had that meeting. What he also said, he actually contradicted himself within the span of about 5 seconds. He said, "Oh, well, this is all secondhand, and the only reason I know of any of this is because what's been reported in the news. Yet I know people who have participated in these meetings." Okay, so so it wasn't reported in the news who participated in these meetings. You only came to the realization of what's been happening because of the news, but you know people who have been actually participating in these meetings.
I mean, I suppose it's possible because it was the Atlantic Caucus that started this, and being an MP for PEI, Mr. Casey probably was part of this caucus. So, like, they would have had that document in the caucus, from what I understand, from what we heard from our conservative insiders anyways, because again, like, all Parliament has been talking about this even before Justin Trudeau found out. So one would think that Casey was present while they were doing the paper, and then one would think that because he's on TV saying that he wants Trudeau to step down, that he's part of this. Again, we can't prove anything though, but that's kind of where my intuition is leading.
Well, and if this guy's being this open about wanting Trudeau out, why would he not have seen it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just bizarre things.
There's a lot of statements that don't quite jive.
But if I were to look at this just from a strategic point of view, why would he kind of say, "Oh, well, I don't know"? Well, it prevents Trudeau from coming at him and saying, "Well, who's everybody else?" He can say, "I don't know." As I said on CBC, I don't know who's in here.
That is true. That could be the one defense for this, that he won't give over the other names if he does in fact have knowledge of them. So
allows the Liberals to keep this compartmentalized to, avoid Trudeau kind of following the breadcrumbs in terms of who do I need to talk to in order to,
stop this rebellion.
Stop all of this, right? So that's the great thing, is there's no proof and there's no leaks other than the fact that this is happening. So that's it. That's all you got. So that's going to be fun for Trudeau to find those breadcrumbs. But so this is basically Sean Casey, and we're not going to go through the rest of the interview. What we are going to go on is flip over to a panel on CTV where there's some interesting discussions about what could possibly happen next.
Brian, I'll start with you. How significant do you think this push is, and can the Prime Minister withstand it, do you think?
It's significant, there's no question, when you have a big, reportedly a big part of your caucus that's willing to sign a letter, allegedly again. Nobody's seen anything, but that's what's been being reported, and sort of the leaks have been confirming that's a big deal. And if only because it is a huge distraction when it comes to your messaging for external purposes with Canadians. But even more importantly, if it starts to get traction and actually becomes something that really starts to have the Prime Minister and his office debate the future of his leadership. Can it work? Sure. I mean, you've certainly seen in the past parties have sort of revolts that end up in some type of action. We saw it south of the border with Biden when he didn't perform very well, to say the least, in the debate, and didn't want to do it. But there was a movement, and with all the pressure, he ended up making his choice. Now, that said, he can also survive it. Look at New Brunswick. A year ago, there was probably 12, 13 MLAs in Blaine Higgs's government that resigned, that said they weren't reoffering. Some of them specifically said that they were not impressed with Higgs's leadership, and it was because of that. And he's running as we speak in the election. He survived it. They changed the channel when it really started to rev up, and he survived, and he's fighting the next election.
Okay, Mr. Liberal Disinformation. So he's trying to say that, oh, these people left Higgs's office because they weren't happy with Higgs's leadership. The problem that was going on back then is, if everyone recalls, that's when Higgs actually came out and said, I think that parents should actually know what's going on with their kids in school. That's what the problematic policy was. And you had all these cowards, either super progressive, one of them was Mr. Dominic Carty, who was former NDP, but now decides he's a conservative.
Mr. Canada's future.
Yeah. Who completely jumped off the ship thinking it was going to go down in the wave of cancel culture. And look at that. Surprise, surprise. The vast majority of Canadians are like, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Fighting the current election, I should say. So it's definitely something he can survive.
Is there a channel changer? Do you think, Lisa, that the Prime Minister and his team could put in the window that ultimately would distract or move people's attention from the idea that, let's say, at least 20 people in his caucus want him out?
I don't think so, Vashi. And I find it interesting. Somebody reminded me today that if you go for the king, you better not miss, right? Because there's going to be retribution at the end of the day. But I think some of the MPs are sitting there and really taking a really hard look at their risk assessment. So they're in their community. They're getting hammered by the people around them, telling them what they think about Mr. Trudeau and the fact that they're not going to be able to vote for them in the next election. And they wonder to themselves, am I better off at least showing that I tried to do something about this, that at least I stood up for what I stood for? Is that a line that they can use on the doors when they are seeking re-election under Mr. Trudeau? Possibly that's what they're thinking, that it's better for them to be able to say to their community, look, I tried, they didn't listen to me, but you know where I am. Send me back to Ottawa and I'll continue to do the good work, but please spare me. And I think that's what this is about right now. There's 20 MPs out there saying, how do I make sure that I disconnect myself from this leader if he's going to take us into the next election, so that I can say in full face to my community, look, I tried and they're just not listening. And yeah, I got punished a little bit. But I don't know whether or not Mr. Trudeau will go as far as to not sign nomination papers, because then you got a lot of independents running in these communities.
Leave it to the Conservative to actually break everything down into common sense. And that's what it is. And that seems to be the exact strategy that these MPs are taking. I don't think it's going to do them a lick of a difference.
No, I think to the public, at least, it looks like, as I had said earlier, that, you didn't actually try to do anything to stop Trudeau, to stop his destructive policies, until it was your own skin on the line.
Well, and this is the thing. So they talk about this line that Sean Casey brought up. Oh, well, I like you. I just don't like Trudeau, so I can't vote for you. Okay. So he's saying, well, they're just tired of Trudeau. Listen, why do you think they're tired of Trudeau? Do you think it's just like, well, I'm tired of seeing his haircut. I'm tired of seeing him say, no. They're tired of the policies, and they're tired that this guy doesn't listen to Canadians.
I mean, to be fair, Canadians tend to vote out a government. Look what happened to Stephen Harper. People got tired of him, and that's how we got into this mess, right? But I think in this case, it's not just a matter of voter fatigue or Canadians are tired of the Prime Minister. This time, I think it's that all of his destructive policies, his inaptitude, his irresponsible handling of our budgets, our immigration system, etc., etc., etc. It's all caught up to him now.
Well, and I think that's proven by the fact that there are so many analysts that say even if Trudeau were to swap out with somebody else, it really wouldn't make a difference at all.
What does it say, Tom, if those MPs are thinking that way, that they are, though?
it says that they know how to read the polls, and they understand that they're, as Lisa just said, they're heading for slaughter in the next electoral slaughter in the next election. This is the second time, Vashi, that Mr. Trudeau has pulled the exact same card out of his deck to try to get out of a tough spot. Just over a year ago, he opened Parliament with allegations against India. Now, 13 months later, he's on a long weekend. He's back from Laos. People want to know what his reaction is to this palace coup. And he says, we're not going to get into party intrigue. I'm busy here taking care of Canadians' safety. It sounds very dramatic, but it doesn't take away from the issue. I've had the same impression that a lot of people have shared. I just did my French panel show, and the sense was, well, this is something being cooked up in Ontario and Atlantic Canada. And lo and behold, I just heard your great interview with Anthony Housefather, who is an MP right here in Montreal, where I am. And I don't think he could have been clearer. He's part of the discussion to try to see who the best person is to lead them into the campaign. Because like a lot of those other people, even though he's in what was always considered a very safe Liberal riding, we've learned that there's no such thing as a safe Liberal riding anymore. So does Mr. Trudeau have, to your question, to Lisa, does he have anything that he can do that could dramatically change the channel? I'll suggest one thing. It's the only one that he's got. He walks out of Rideau Cottage, across the lawn to Rideau Hall, walks in, knocks on the bed, and asks for Mary Simon to give him an electoral writ.
Wasn't that my hypothesis?
Yep. Yep.
I love it when our predictions kind of line up with what the quote-unquote professionals are saying.
Right. Well, and the other thing that Tom kind of confirmed is one thing that you heard it here first, that the whole India thing was manufactured because we believe that there's interference from India. Let's just be clear about that. But to have a press conference on Thanksgiving Monday that nobody's watching right after Trudeau comes back, right after he is getting lambasted by questions of what's going on with the internal rebellion in your caucus, he cooks this press conference up in order to be able to change the narrative.
Right. The press conference where they don't actually say anything except that, oh, look, we kicked out these diplomats, but we can't tell you why. We can't tell you, what we're doing afterwards. Like, we can't tell you anything, but look over here. Yeah,
we can't even tell you where and who and why, like all of this. But, if one of them actually happens to pose a threat to you, then give us a call. So that's what we ended up talking about. And there was an article in the National Post today. I swear they watched Northern Perspective, because that's almost exactly what we said. So now you have Tom Mulcair, giving his point of view, and he even agrees with it, because we had Trudeau opening Parliament with India, and here you go, India again. Funny enough, he's not talking about China, which is what the whole public inquiry is about.
Right.
But, there you go. But this is the thing, right? This is basically the only card he has left to play.
About the only other thing that he can do is called prorogation. We've talked about that. That is simply pulling the emergency brake before his political train goes off the tracks and tries to hit some sort of reset. Would that take the form of a leadership vote? Would that take another form? Who knows? But at this stage of the game, there's not much left for Mr. Trudeau. And I have a little bit more sympathy than most watching a leader go through this sort of thing. But when you have somebody like Anthony Housefather getting in on that conversation, that means that things have really changed within his caucus. And he's always been very good at dominating his caucus.
Now, recall that Tom Mulcair has recently said, oh, well, from what I'm hearing, Justin Trudeau's getting ready to step down, and, there's going to be a leadership change. What happened to that, Tom?
Talking to.
What happened to that, Tom?
Because, exactly a week ago, when you were in Ottawa, you were hearing rumors of prorogation from insiders. And now everybody seems to have switched gears to there could be an election, which was kind of my prediction all along, not to brag, but...
Well, I think prorogation was more reasonable when Trudeau didn't think that his hold on leadership was under threat. The problem is if you go to prorogation now as Trudeau, all you're going to be hearing from everybody is why you should be stepping down.
Yeah, it would make him look like a weak leader.
And you will allow tons of time for these rebel factions to stew and brew and gain momentum and probably push you out before the next parliament actually comes. And they will actually use prorogation as most likely a rallying cry to get rid of him. So the only way that he can essentially skirt around this is to call an election, because that has to galvanize the party. There's no choice. You have to act as one party, one message, one campaign in order to actually win anything in an election. And it puts all these leadership calls to rest, because it's impossible. You can't have a leadership race in the middle of an election.
I mean, technically you can. There's no law. There's nothing in our constitution.
It would be the worst
that
idea.
You can't, but you really shouldn't.
Well, how are you going to be selling a party that has no leader for the first half of a campaign? It's not going to happen. So, so this is fascinating, folks.
I think to Tom's point, Rob, and you and I have been speaking about this, like, even though on the record everyone's saying no to prorogation, you've got to think there's a very active discussion right now. I don't know what other lever they have or lever they have to push at this point in time to just even press pause for a moment. Otherwise, you're looking at the possibility of being amongst all these MPs who want you out in Parliament Hill next week.
Well, exactly, Vashi. Do you really want, if you're Justin Trudeau, to have, 100+ Liberal MPs gathering in a room, a caucus room, and kvetching? Because these folks have just been in their riding on Thanksgiving week. They'll have been by next week. And they'll have been talking to their constituents and their families and their friends and neighbors. And you're going to hear, I think, in the coming weeks, a bunch that are going to say they're not going to run again for lots of reasons, want to spend more time with the family, yada, yada, yada. But it's mostly about their own survival, their own professional survival. And remember, these folks are, they're franchisees, right? In each of their riding, they represent the Liberal Party. So do they want to represent the Justin Trudeau Liberal Party, or do they want to represent the Liberal Party that they could get reelected in? And this is we saw this here. I'm in Toronto, and we saw it in St. Paul's in June. Justin Trudeau was on the cover of the conservative Don Stewart's literature, because that was the ballot question here in Toronto. It was the ballot question where Tom is in Montreal. In David Lamette's riding, Paul Martin's old riding, they lost to the Bloc Québécois. So there isn't a safe Liberal seat right now, and Liberal MPs know that. They've been talking to their friends and family this last week, and they'll be doing so a little bit more later this week. I think next week's going to be very interesting.
So what does it say? In the last couple of by-elections, the Liberals haven't, or the Conservatives haven't been putting Pierre's face on the literature. They've been putting Trudeau's face on the literature, saying, do you really want this guy? And it's worked.
Well, because Canadians are done. We see the cost of Trudeau, and it's horrible. Not only in terms of, personal finances, but look around your community. Look what's happened.
Well, look at our reputation on the international stage as well. We're being actively excluded now from intelligence organizations and meetings with other countries, our allies, because Canada cannot be trusted on how we handle foreign interference. Like, if you've been following the public inquiry, it's been a disaster recently. One of the stories that's recent that's come out of it is Bill Blair, who was the public safety minister at the time, was given a request or a warrant to sign by CSIS to survey this guy that is Michael Chan, right? A guy who has suspicions to strong ties against China. And that warrant sat in his office for 2 months, where it's typically signed between 5 and 10 days. So what the heck is going on here? And somebody in his office who has a close personal relationship with Michael Chan asked for a brief on it before it even made it to Bill Blair. So there's all of this crap that's been going on. And was Bill Blair concerned about it? Does he want to know why he didn't get it? He's like, no, I think it's fine.
Well, and we'll be breaking down that testimony as soon as we can.
But this is the thing, right? You have all of this crap going on. So it's no wonder that people are saying, look at how bad Trudeau is. Are you sure you want this guy to lead the country after the next election? It's incredible that he's that unpopular, that he's become an asset to his opposition.
Yeah, that's the understatement of the year. Brian, do you have a gut feeling on whether or not, if someone else does take over, it means a different outcome for the Liberals ultimately?
If there's a new leader, I think first off, I'll put the caveat of my opining on that question of he is the leader. He was nominated by the party. He was elected by Canadians, and
I'm asking you a hypothetical.
And he has the confidence of the House, right? So I think we always have to sort of remind ourselves of those important pieces. That said, I think if you had another leader, it's a bit of, I don't know if it's the right term to use, but a Hail Mary in the sense that you could have a new leader come in with very little time. So that could actually maybe be a little worse when you think about it, to be, if you really put in context. But there are, as we know, a lot of people thinking about it, a lot of good candidates that would want to take on the role, and maybe they could do better, and maybe they could swing things around. Maybe they're different enough just to get a little bit of traction, and although there'll only be probably a small window, maybe it's a window that's large enough for them to be able to get enough traction with Canadians. Or maybe they just do better and they don't form government, but maybe they got more seats. Those are all possibilities that the party could think about.
Lisa, do you have a gut feeling on whether it would make a difference?
No, I don't think. I think the cast is. I think it's. I think the die
That's more
is cast.
concise than me, Lisa. That's a little more concise.
Yeah, sorry.
Spot the Liberal. This guy, basically bows in deference to Trudeau and saying, well, we just have to remember, he was elected, and, he has the confidence of the House right now, and yada, 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 and, I think it's a possibility, I don't know. And then, Lisa, what do you think? No.
Leave it to a conservative to tell it like it is,
like,
right?
Let's get real.